Hello and welcome back to Crystal Harbor, where in the last episode we built this zoo and this nature reserve over here, and this time I will be expanding into this area over here. I will be mainly using mid-rise buildings, but also a bunch of low-density buildings the further out you go from the downtown area. First I need to make kind of a basic road layout for this whole area, so let's begin by doing that. Building the initial road layout is definitely one of the most important parts of the entire build, in my opinion, because it's kind of the backbone of your city. It's what you build off of going forward. So it's really important to get it right, and for me it's also important to not make it a grid. I want the layout to be more dynamic usually, and right now I'm just making the layout for the higher density area, and I make the one for the lower density one later on when I build that.
I'm falling up, I'm falling down.
Okay, now I just built this kind of basic road layout for the area. This area over here will be kind of more mid-rise buildings and higher density, while this area over here and around up here will be mainly low-density suburbs. And I did not build any roads for those yet because I think it's better to build those roads as I'm placing the buildings there. Same as over here actually. I did not place any of the smaller roads. Obviously these grids are still way too big to place any buildings in them. So I will be using these smaller roads over here. And I will be placing the buildings in between these. But yeah, I just needed the main road layout for now, and now I can start placing some buildings. So yeah, for me the next step after placing all of the roads is starting to place down some buildings. Usually if it's lower density I'm okay with just zoning it in, but if it's higher density I usually prefer hand placing the buildings, because in my opinion that just gives off a better, more detailed effect in the end. And what I'm trying to do with these buildings here is actually kind of fade them out. So basically as I'm going further and further away from the downtown center, I'm trying to make the buildings less and less tall. And most of these buildings are of course residential, as you would expect, but there are also some office buildings in the middle of there and some commercial buildings as well, of course.
'Cause I'm stuck in limbo. 'Cause I'm stuck in limbo. Living in the same routine, like the seasons I'm on repeat. It's a long way down. Trying not to follow suit. Don't like the color, I'll change the shade of it.
Now after placing down most of the buildings, I actually already start off with the detailing. And for the detailing, the first step I usually do is just placing down a bunch of paths everywhere, because I want to make my cities really walkable. So what I'm doing for the most part is placing a bunch of paths in between buildings, creating green spaces in between them, kind of like mini parks. And also I'm adding some bigger parks, like around this big clock here. I'm of course adding the paths mostly for just looks from above, but I'm also trying to think of how they would function if it was a real city. Because I find that if you just kind of mindlessly place them just for the looks, then when you really start paying attention to it, they just don't make sense at all, and it kind of ruins the whole aesthetic. After placing the paths, my next step is to place these concrete assets in the places where it's needed, because not all hand-placed buildings actually come with kind of a concrete base. A lot of them are just the building itself and then the bottom is grass, but you would expect a building to have some kind of a base instead of just grass. So I usually place these concrete bits around the base of most buildings and in between paths and buildings where there is some narrow little slivers of dirt left and stuff like that. And then the next step is the vegetation itself. I'm trying to keep the style of detailing the vegetation kind of consistent throughout most of the city, so I'm doing what you might have seen in the previous episodes, which is just placing some of these small bushes around the sides of the paths and then filling them with some bigger trees. But I'm also, of course, making some unique parks with some different plants, just to diversify the area a little bit.
I know I'm holding on to this, holding on. Don't let me repeat it. Don't let me repeat it. I know I'm holding on to this, holding on, holding on, holding on,
We froze, cold night in the winter hot cold. Sorry that I fall away sometimes. Sorry that I fall away sometimes. Yeah, yeah. The end, got to end it all on the weekend. Sorry that I feel that way sometimes. Sorry that I feel that way sometimes. Oh, oh, yeah. You don't really wanna know me. Hanging in the corner with a nosebleed. High on whatever they sold me. That's the old me, yeah. 6 years later trying to find me. Still trying to figure out the mind piece. Looking for the love inside.
And so now this higher density section here is done and detailed. The two biggest parks are the one around the big countdown clock, which I made with these pink trees and pink bushes, and then the other one is this one next to the community center over here. Of course, there's also a lot of smaller little parks with walkways and with trees all throughout this whole area. Yeah, those are the two kind of main ones, I guess you could say. This higher density area has 4,600 people living in it right now, but it fluctuates. It used to be a bit over 5,000, now it's 4,600. Maybe it will go back up, maybe it won't, I'm not really sure. But either way, with this area done, it's now time to move on to this, which will be mainly single family houses, maybe 1 or 2 apartments somewhere in the more central areas, but I don't exactly plan on there being apartments. So now it's time to start work on the suburbs. And so once again I'm just starting by placing the main road layout for the area. And this area itself doesn't need as many roads, and the roads don't need to be as big because the population won't be as dense. because this area, as I said before, will be mainly single-family houses, so there will be way less traffic here. Now, with that being said, this area was kinda complicated to build roads in, because it turned out to be kind of an awkward shape. And I had to figure out a way to fill it all in with square homes that City Skylines offers. So I had to be pretty creative. And once again, even here I want to avoid making grids as much as possible. So you can see me making these kind of cul-de-sacs and these roads that just end abruptly. And hopefully that kind of gives the impression of a kind of little suburb.
When it falls in the wind, you know, and you say you wanna die.
So that will be the road layout for this area. I tried to make it a bit more interesting with some cul-de-sacs and some smaller roads that don't connect to anything, just like this. And hopefully it looks good when I put the buildings in as well.
Having fun. What if it never ends? I'm like a
When I place the buildings in my cities, I usually like to start out with all of the regular buildings and then put in all of the special buildings like schools and other services in afterwards. But for this one, I kind of did it the other way around. So here I'm just starting off by putting some shops on the main strip, where you would expect to find them in a small town like this. And after that, I actually place a few schools in the area. Then on the very edge of town, I even place a few office buildings. I kind of use move it to move them inside of each other to make them seem like one bigger building. I think that gives a pretty cool effect. And then I start placing some parks. I also place these government offices. And I start building this castle park, which honestly I think it ended up turning out as the best part of this little town over here. I really like the way this castle park turned out in the end.
and you are nothing, but you say you wanna dance, and you're worrying, oh, you'll end up in the wrong hands. I'm lacking sincerity, but you don't care at all. Miss booze, lit cigarettes, trying to take me home.
Now I'm already starting with placing the paths, while most of the buildings aren't even in yet. Which is fine because I already have most of the special services buildings and I don't really want to have the paths as much throughout the residential areas as next to the special buildings. But of course I will also place them in the residential areas. And here on this side of the big school I actually end up finding this asset that I didn't even know I had before. And it makes for a pretty nice kind of row house design. So I just end up going for that little development as a bit of higher density in the center of this small town. And then I just keep placing paths next to the rest of the special buildings.
Feelings. It's like I can't walk on the ceiling. Oh yeah, got me dreaming, dreaming in color.
I also place a bunch of paths in between the suburbs, especially at the ends of cul-de-sacs, so that it's easier for the citizens to get around. And then I start hand placing a bunch of residential buildings as well. And the reason I'm not zoning them in is because, well, I can't, because of the weird shape of the roads. I chose the big suburbs theme for this area, and the big suburbs theme only has housing assets that are 4 units deep, if that makes sense. So as soon as the grid isn't like perfectly long, then the buildings won't zone in. And so that's why I'm hand placing them in most spaces. Where the grid is better, then I'm zoning them in as well, but they don't really want to grow on their own, so I just end up hand placing most of them actually.
Magic. No, I'm never letting go. Now that I have it with you. When you kiss me, it's like the stars fall out the sky onto my heart to cover up what I don't wanna show. I let you in deeper than I let anyone else before. Fell in love with my broken pieces, took them all and made them yours. Didn't know when my heart beat needed, skipping out, no I can't keep score. When I lose my breath, boy, you got me breathing. Oh, every little thing you do, every time you hold me, take me higher, higher. Every little thing you do, every time you hold me, take me higher, higher. Oh.
So now basically all of the buildings for this area are placed, and I already did most of the detailing work as well. As in, I already placed a bunch of paths, I placed concrete where it's supposed to be, like in between these stores. But I did not yet place any vegetation, so now let's get to doing that. I need to place some bushes, some trees, basically just make the area a bit more green. But the vegetation in the story is kind of the same as before. As I said earlier in the video, my main goal is to keep the design of the whole city kind of consistent, so I'm doing mainly the same design, which is just bushes on the sides with trees in the middle. But since this is a lower density area, I can actually afford to place a bit more trees, especially around the city outside of the residential areas. I make quite a dense forest outside of the city here as well, and I think that just improves the look of the whole area. And now this area is done. I basically just detailed it the same as all the other areas, just some bushes and trees for the most part, and I also tried to make some more unique parks, like this one around the school, and this castle park over here, which is supposed to be just a historical castle and a tourist attraction as well. Yeah, I think this area turned out pretty nicely. I also like these row houses. I think they fit in pretty well on this main road, right across the road from the government offices, and next to two schools. So it makes sense for there to be a little bit higher density buildings here. And also some offices right here, which is maybe not the most realistic place for offices with hundreds and hundreds of workers, but I think overall, just when looking at the city, they fit in really well, so yeah. And now I have to talk about quite an important topic. So, Cities Skylines 2 releases in 3 days, and there's this video and one more video, or maybe even 2 more videos about this city after it, but they won't be city builds. One of them will be just basically a time-lapse compilation of the entire city build from start to finish, and I'm planning on another one being just a city tour. Something similar to this camera, with these kinds of shots. And while these kind of cinematic shots play out in the background, I guess I need to ask, should I continue this series even after Cities Skylines 2 is released? I'm not planning on continuing the series as of right now. I'm planning on just completely switching to Cities Skylines 2. But of course, if you want to see this city continued, then put it in the comments and I will have no troubles doing it. So, yeah, this is probably gonna be the last episode of Crystal Harbor. So this is the city in its final form, with 85,000 residents. Didn't quite hit 100,000 that I thought I would at the beginning, but that's completely fine as well. So yeah, this has been quite a nice series, starting all the way out here with this little starting residential zone that is maybe not as detailed, because I was just starting out and I actually learned quite a lot during this series. And there is quite a lot of things that I would change, like for instance this park, I don't know if it really looks that great, and these tall skyscrapers are just on the edge of the city and it just suddenly ends in a straight line. So yeah, I could still expand the city quite a bit is what I'm saying. But yeah, this has been quite a nice series. We built an airport, a giant nature reserve over here, a smaller one of the same type over here. We have kind of 2 or maybe even 3 downtowns, depending on how you count them. This is the main one, then this is the second biggest one that we built just a few episodes ago, and I guess this one could be counted as the 3rd one, or maybe even this one could be the 4th one. I'm not really sure. Well, there is an abandoned building, but just ignore that. You don't see it, okay? There's also a historical town over here. Yeah. I believe that this city is mostly done. I might even not return to it after this. So, I guess see you in the next few videos about the city tour and the time-lapse compilation of the entire city build. And after that, see you in Cities Skylines 2. Goodbye.